All right, all right. Hey guys, hope everybody's having a great night. Just let everybody kind of trickle in here. Looks like we got a pretty packed house. So as always, guys, my name is Adam Lang. Really excited to have you guys all on tonight's Denver Homebuyer Masterclass. Before we get started, though, I really just wanted to be real with you guys for a second. This is definitely one of the most unique and challenging housing markets we've seen in a really long time here in Denver. Prices are high, interest rates are stubborn, competition might be feeling a little bit overwhelming. So if you've been feeling frustrated or maybe even discouraged, you guys are not alone. But here is the good news. So even in this market today, there's still plenty of smart ways to win. And tonight, we're going to show you guys exactly how buyers just like you are successfully landing homes here in Denver. So you guys are going to leave tonight with clear strategies, proven tips, and a game plan that you can use whether you're looking to buy later this year or maybe not even for another 6 or 12 months. So along with my co-host, Ben Adams, I'm going to be introducing him in a second here. We're going to dive into a lot of valuable stuff tonight. So what we're going to be covering a complete overview of the home buying process using an approach that we've actually created called the close method. We're going to be breaking down today's market conditions, both locally here in Denver, as well as across the country. Also just what to expect as we kind of wrap up these next 3 months. We're going to be sharing some top strategies for buying as well in this year, as well as next year, that our actual clients are using today to win. And also just sharing 3 really specific common buyer mistakes that you definitely want to avoid. And then we're going to be at the end having a live Q&A to help answer any questions that come up. So some really quick housekeeping before we get started. Please keep your microphones muted. If you guys are, a little bit overwhelmed, we're going to be giving you guys a ton of info. It's going to maybe feel a little bit like you're drinking from a fire hose. So if questions do come up and we're going through any of this stuff, feel free to type a question that you might have in the chat. And Ben and I will try and answer those in real time if it's relevant to the content we're talking about at that time. But if not, we'll save it for the end, and that'll be the first questions that we'll answer during that live Q&A. So really excited to have you guys all here. Let's jump right into it. And first and foremost, just welcome my co-host, Ben. Hey, Ben.
Hey, thank you so much for having me here. I love doing these presentations. You're right. It is a little bit of a challenging time, but also tremendous amounts of opportunity. We're going to go over some strategies and ways to overcome some of the affordability issues that we're experiencing in this Denver market, but really excited to be a resource and can't wait to share everything that we have planned.
Yeah, I'm excited. Looks like we have a lot of people joining us tonight. I recognize a few names. So, hey, guys, also see a few that I don't recognize. So looking forward to connecting with you guys, hopefully after tonight's call as well. So a lot of different things that might be going through your head as far as what the biggest challenges are in your world right now. I put together 4 that are kind of the most common that we're hearing right now the most. Number 1, just saving for a down payment, understanding that, buyers struggle with high down payment requirements, but we've got some really exciting stuff on that Ben will share that you don't necessarily need that 20% that you often hear. Also, just understanding the market. I've got a lot of really good, relevant info to share with you guys tonight that's up to date for the last couple weeks. So really some interesting stuff that's going on right now in the news that we're going to talk about. And then also going to talk a little bit more about writing competitive offers. This is another big one that there's a lot of strategy behind this that we're going to dig into and share some really cool, kind of unique ways to really craft a winning offer. And then last but not least, just finding the perfect home. I know a lot of you guys that I see on tonight are from out of state, and it's even more challenging, at least by perception. You feel like it's more challenging if you are out of state just to, buy a home somewhere that you aren't currently living in. So we're going to talk through some strategies for you guys specifically, as well as just anybody that might already be in Denver on how to find the right home, balancing those needs, budget, location, all that good stuff. So before we dig into all of this, I'd love just to give you guys a little high-level intro of Ben and who he is and what makes him so great and why I'm so excited to have him with me tonight. So he's a Colorado native, University of Colorado graduate, over 22 years, probably about 23 years by now. I think I made this slide about 6 months ago. So you might be at 23 years now. Personally funded over $300 million in home loans, helped over 700 families achieve home ownership. There's a very prestigious award called the Scotsman Guide Award that he's won 4 times. And just an active real estate investor. That's probably my favorite stat out of all of these is Ben, just in the last few years, really growing this portfolio of rental properties across multiple states. So Ben, really, again, excited to have you on tonight.
Well, let me introduce you, Adam. I love introducing Adam because of all of his credentials and the impact that he's having with buyers and sellers, especially here in this Denver market. So Adam is a 42-year-old Colorado and Denver native. He ranked 5th out of 344 Denver EXP agents in 2024 in sales volume. He was also in the top 10% of all Colorado agents with over $8 million in personal sales last year. He's a certified real estate negotiation expert. He's also the host of Living in Denver, which is his YouTube channel, co-host of the Pursuit of Progress podcast with me. And he also has over 55 5-star Google reviews. A lot of those are just here in the last couple of years. So he is really helping buyers in this challenging Denver market in a way that very few agents out there are.
Thanks, Ben. I really appreciate that. So enough about us. Let's talk now about why you guys are all here tonight, just really understanding how to win in today's market. And we're going to talk again about a lot of different stuff tonight, but I always like to start out these master classes just sharing some accurate, up-to-date, relevant info about the local market here in Denver. So yesterday is the data that I pulled for this tonight. So the average rate for a 30-year fixed mortgage was at 6.35 yesterday, 6.35%. But what's even more exciting is just to see how things are starting to change a little bit in this optimism for what's to come next year. So this past week, last Wednesday, we actually had the lowest rate in 3 years. It dropped all the way to 6.13%, which was exciting. And I want to just share with you guys a few slides that I put together specifically for tonight, just over the past few weeks. And I actually added this one just about an hour ago because I thought it was really just interesting. I saw another industry person that I follow sharing this, and I wanted to share it with you guys as well. So October 12th to 18th, so we're looking at less than a month away, has been identified as the best week to buy in 2025. And a little precursor to that is that the best time to buy is always when it makes the most sense for you. But I think this really did have some interesting reasoning behind this. So obviously, right now, we're in what's called a buyer's market, which means that there's a lot of homes on the market. Prices are also a little bit lower right now than peak season. Sellers that still have homes that are on the market are not freaking out, but they're realizing that they're coming up on the end of the year where we're going to see a significant drop in interest and buyer activity. So sellers are really starting to negotiate in ways we haven't seen in a long time. Builders, especially with new construction homes, are also really starting to stack incentives really high, just putting pressure on the resale homes, existing homes that are also for sale, that they're almost kind of needing to follow suit in order to just compete. So a lot going on. We're going to dig into a lot of this in more depth here in a little bit, but just some interesting data to share with you. So a few other things regarding this past month. So every month, DMAR, which is the Denver Metro Association of Realtors, they put out this monthly report, and that's where I pull a lot of this data from. So just a few bullet points that I'll share quickly here. The busy summer market has officially cooled down. Really since the 4th of July, activity starts to decline week over week. And by mid-September right now, we're seeing that usual shift into fall. Kids are back in school. Holidays are, about a month away. Fewer people are just out there looking at homes. So I wouldn't expect a fall rush of buyers, even though we are starting to see this slightly decreased interest rate, which is definitely going to help with this. But it's really more of a myth unless these rates significantly drop or incomes just locally here in Denver start to go way up, which I don't see that happening right now either. So if you're a buyer and you are still on the sidelines, waiting longer could cost you depending on your specific scenario. If you are a buyer, though, because more homes are sitting, the more price drops are happening in some scenarios. Now might be a better time than later, just depending on, again, what makes the most sense for you. So for buyers, there are more homes for sale right now. It's actually more than we've had in almost a decade. But the caveat here is there's a lot fewer serious buyers out there shopping. So you don't need to rush. If you're a buyer right now, you can definitely take your time. You can look around a bit more. You can definitely make that smart decision, and you have leverage. You have the ability to, maybe entertain a few different homes that are interesting to you, and you don't have to necessarily just jump on the first home that fits your criteria like you did, 3 or 4 years ago, and we had such a crazy amount of activity here in Denver. Most sellers are definitely cutting prices right now to get attention. Over half of the homes that were under contract last month had at least one price drop. And on average, it's taking about 15 showings before a home goes under contract. And just to kind of add to that one, I follow that metric specifically just so I have that info for my current listings that I'm selling. And usually right now, we're actually excited and happy if we're really just getting like 1, maybe 2 showings a week. So it's just crazy to think that how, low that is in comparison to a few years back. So when you hear 15 plus showings, that could easily be 3 or 4 months days on market, depending on the type of home and where it's located. So long story short, buyers definitely have options and a power to negotiate. Sorry, Ben, is there something?
And I wanted to jump in really quick, Adam. And that's what's so exciting to me in this Denver market is really for the first time in 15 years, it is a buyer's market. Buyers are in control. And so if you're someone that's considering buying, you have more inventory, you have more options. You can be patient. I remember doing open houses 3 or 4 years ago. I went to one in the Highlands Ranch area, and there were 70 people in line waiting to go view this open house before I even got there and opened the door. That's how crazy it was. So now that's not the case. And so all of that leverage has shifted to buyers. And so what we're seeing is price drops from sellers. We are seeing sellers pay for buyers' closing costs. And then on the financing side, we're also able to use those seller concessions and seller credits to combat affordability. Here in the last couple of weeks, I had a buyer that I helped, and we were able to get him a temporary buy down where his interest rate was 2 full points lower for the first 12 months than what the market rate was, 1 full point lower the second 12 months before it matured at the note rate. So there are some really exciting opportunities, strategies. But what Adam said is the time to buy is when it makes sense for you. Adam is not going to force anyone to make a decision right now. I'm not that same way either. I want to be a resource. We both want to be a resource to you, answer your questions, give you the information you need so you can make an informed financial decision.
Very well said. So a few numbers to share with you guys. Housing inventory is trending down as many sellers are still deciding right now that it probably makes more sense for them to wait until spring to list their home. So these new listings are slowing down. Many sellers are just hitting pause for the season. That buyer activity, because of that, is remaining a little bit flat. No big surge compared to earlier this summer. Odds of selling in the next 30 days are a little bit lower than normal, but it is a little bit higher than in August. So it's a little bit better from past month. I think part of that is also just due to these interest rates and finally seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Showings are up year over year. Buyers are out there. They're just moving a bit slower, as Ben was talking about. And like I just said, also homes are sitting a little bit longer than last month, but not as long as this time last year. So price cuts are everywhere. They're definitely still larger than they were a year ago. So, long-winded way of just saying that it's a really good time to be a buyer. And it's also still, a good time to be a seller as long as you have the right strategy. It's just really requiring sellers to level up and just make sure that they're hitting everything perfectly, whether it be, the home, the presentation of the home, the marketing, all that good stuff. And before we kind of move on to this close, this acronym that we've created called close method, I just want to share with you guys, I also have a really, really helpful, it's 5-part video series that just goes in depth on the home buying process from start to finish. So as we go through everything this evening, if there's parts that just kind of maybe go over your head, or you just have the need to just kind of go back and learn a little bit more about these specific points of the home buyer process, I'll be sharing with you guys the link to this. It's over 2 hours of content and can be really helpful if you just need that extra little bit of education when it comes to certain parts of the home buyer journey.
Yeah, what I'd love to do is just share the buyer's roadmap here. And then I'd like to talk a little bit more in depth in the next screen on our close acronym, our close method. So if you've never gone through this process before, maybe it's been several years, this is the order of operations or the order of steps that you want to take as you're navigating the home buyer process. So step number 1, you want to meet with the real estate professional. From there, you want to get pre-approved, which is step number 2. Then once you're pre-approved, you're going to move on to step number 3, start looking for homes. Once you've identified the property, step number 4 is write or make an offer. Then you're going to be going through the negotiation and the contract phase, which is step 5. Once you go under contract, at that point, you will be in escrow, which is step number 6. Once you are nearing the closing day, that's when all those final details are confirmed. Your lender is going to send you the closing disclosure. You'll get a copy of the settlement statement. And then step number 8, which is the final step, is closing day. That is the day that you bring in your down payment, your cash to close. And then once all the documents are signed, the loan is dispersed, you will get the keys.
That's a good day.
That's a great day.
Yep. So Ben and I, we have really been intentional about trying to use acronyms as a tool to help remember things a little bit better. So I know some of this might seem pretty basic to you guys, but I think it's helpful just to have a way to remember this. So we created this close method, which is, as you can see here, spelling out the word close, but C is for connecting with the lender, getting that pre-approval. We're going to dive into that here with Ben here in a second. L is for looking at properties, really finding the perfect home. And as easy as that sounds to some people, it can be pretty challenging. And there's definitely some strategies behind doing this to ensure that you're not overlooking anything and you're seeing everything that's available out there for you. For the O letter, that's for the offer. So submitting the offer, crafting a winning offer. The more important part of there is crafting the winning offer. S is for securing the deal, just navigating the entire contract, the dates and deadlines. And then last but not least, E is for executing the closing, doing the final walkthrough and going physically to the closing. Or you could also do it remotely for any of our audience tonight that's out of state. So if you want to close on the right home, you got to remember the close method. So Ben, let's just chat first about step 1, which is the pre-approval process. I think this is a big one that in our past webinars and masterclasses, a lot of people have questions on this. It's something that sounds simple, but there's a lot to it and a lot of different tools, different options available for people. So just share with us a little bit about this pre-approval process.
Yeah, it is so absolutely critically important to get pre-approved first. And there are so many different reasons for that. But reason number 1 is you want to be able to identify what your goals are. And by talking to a lender and getting pre-approved in advance, at that point, you're going to know what your loan options are. You'll be able to talk through different strategies. For example, someone might have a specific down payment goal. They may have a specific monthly payment goal. And a lot of lenders, including myself, on these slides, you'll see that it references American Money 101. That's my YouTube channel. The bank that I work for is North Point Bank. And at North Point, we have lots of different loan programs. We do traditional minimum down payment loans. We also do reduced down payment loans. And then we also have down payment assistance loans as well that we've partnered with CHAFA, which is the Colorado Housing and Finance Agency. So that's one way that we are attacking some of the affordability issues that we're seeing in this Denver market from a down payment perspective. But then we also have different ways that we're attacking it from a monthly payment perspective as well. And there's also a lot of great affordable housing loan programs here in Denver. And if you don't talk to a lender, those loan programs are going to have different ways to get qualified from a credit score perspective. A lot of them have income limits. Some of them can be as low as 110,000, go all the way up to 170,000. And in some cases, if you are eligible for an affordable housing loan, you may be entitled to more favorable financing terms, more favorable interest rates, reduced mortgage insurance if your down payment is going to be less than 20%. We also have some really exciting financial tool programs. For example, our all-in-one is more of a financial tool than a traditional loan. So by speaking to a lender, you can start to craft your vision for a purchase, whether it's a primary residence, an investment property, and it gives you the opportunity to set those financial boundaries. One mistake that I see folks make is they don't have strong financial boundaries for their purchase. And so getting pre-approved, you know what your max purchasing power is. You're going to have an idea of what your monthly payment is. And then you can also have that discussion with your lender. What is important to you? What are your goals? What are you looking to accomplish? What is your vision for the property? How long do you anticipate being in the property? Is this going to be something that you envision yourself in for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, or is it going to be a little bit more intermediary? So coming up and defining the vision, it's going to help you identify your goals, create those boundaries, but then you also may be eligible for things that you hadn't considered. And that is, just a couple of the reasons why it's so important to get pre-approved in advance.
Love that. So just run through the checklist really quick of kind of the high level, what might be needed for anybody out there that's going to want to do a pre-approval. And one additional request I have for you also is just to explain just the different types of pre-approval. I was talking with a friend yesterday about this, about how there's different levels and there's different qualities of a pre-approval, meaning if I'm a seller and I receive a pre-approval or a proof of funds with the offer, there's different ones, and different types of pre-approvals have more weight than others. They are taken a little bit more seriously. So share that also with everybody.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple different terms in the mortgage industry that a lot of folks get confused and they don't understand what the different definitions are. So the first one is getting pre-qualified and the second one is getting pre-approved. They sound very similar, right? Pre-qualified, pre-approved, but they're actually very different. So when you get pre-qualified, what that means is that you've submitted an application with a lender and they have pulled your credit. And based off of the information that you've submitted, they have pre-qualified you for this specific loan program at this specific interest rate with this down payment. The challenge, though, and the problem with getting pre-qualified is that nothing has been verified. And so that is why I always take it an additional step with all of the customers that I work with, and I get them pre-approved, not just pre-qualified. So the difference on a pre-approval is the buyer or the borrower is still going to take that first step. They're going to submit the application online. The lender is going to pull credit. But then what they're going to do from there is they're then going to verify everything on the application. And so if I'm working with someone and they put down that they've been at their job for 3 years and they're on a salary and they make $50,000 a year. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to contact the employer. We're going to verify the employment. We're going to get the pay stubs from the individual. We're also going to get their W-2s, and we're going to completely verify their source of income along with their employment. We're also going to verify their assets for the down payment. We're going to verify any retirement accounts that they may have. We're going to review the credit report for recurring obligations in addition to verifying what the score is. And so what we're going to do is we're going to verify everything on the application. And that way we want to make sure that there's no surprises. A lot of times folks don't understand that the income that they might get in real life is a little bit different than the income that a lender is going to use. So for example, if someone is getting overtime income, we have to average that overtime income over the last 2 or 3 years. Same with commission income. If someone is self-employed, a lot of times we have to look at their tax returns. Now, one great thing about North Point is that a lot of self-employed business owners, they'll write off all of their business income. And we have some other loan programs like business bank statement loan programs. We even have a personal bank statement loan program. And so what we're doing, though, in any event is that we're verifying all of this information. So when we send it out to, when we send the pre-approval out to the listing agent and the seller, we are already able to say that we have verified credit, identification. We have all of the income documents in receipt. We've verified the funds for closing. And this individual is pre-approved up to this sales price with this down payment with these terms. And if there are other competing offers, knowing that this buyer has taken those additional steps and has been fully pre-approved, not just pre-qualified, it does help their offer stand out, no question.
Definitely. So, we talked about all these things that have to get collected for the pre-approval process. I think just as important are also these 5 things that you need to, without a doubt, avoid after applying for a mortgage. And these are really, really big. Actually, I have to thank Ben for this. Some of these I didn't even really know about until him and I dug a little deeper and started preparing for some of the content we've put out over the last couple of years. So share a little bit more on this really quick too, Ben.
Yeah, these are things that you don't want to do after you applied for a mortgage. Now, some of it might be common sense, but some other things on here can really be a big deal and cause problems if you do them. So one thing you really don't want to do is change bank accounts. And the reason for that is because all lenders and underwriters, they're very particular about where the funds for the down payment are coming from. And so if you're moving money from this account to that account, or maybe you open a new checking account at a different bank and you're moving money over there, you're going to have to paper trail all of that. And all of the funds need to be documented. So it can cause a lot of paperwork and be very frustrating. You also don't want to co-sign on a loan for a family member or a friend. before, during, or after the application process. Remember, if someone comes to you and asks you to co-sign for them, what it means is that they either don't qualify for the loan because they have insufficient income, or it means that they have a repeated pattern of behavior of not paying their bills on time. So I'm very against co-signing. And I've learned that mistake. I've made that mistake the hard way. I co-signed for a buddy of mine 6 or 7 years ago, even though I knew I shouldn't. And guess what? It has caused problems for me for those exact reasons. You also don't want to make any large purchases. One of the questions that I get, home buyers are very excited after they go under contract, and they're always very eager to start thinking about furnishing the home, and they want to go buy all their furnishings so it gets delivered shortly after they close on the home. And you don't really want to do that because, again, the lender more than likely is either going to do a soft credit pull or an additional credit check prior to closing. And you don't want there to be any new debt on there. You also don't want to be depositing any cash into your bank account. Regardless of loan programs, most of the time, most lenders are not going to like seeing cash deposits into your business bank account. And then lastly, you don't want to have your credit pulled or apply for any new credit cards during the application process. Again, that lender is going to be notified by the bureaus, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. If you have had any credit inquiries, they will notify your lender. And depending on what the debt to income ratio is, other recurring obligations, it may or may not be a problem. So the best thing to do is just wait until the loan has closed, the purchase is closed, and the transaction is 100% settled. And then you can go make that big purchase or apply for that in-store furniture financing credit card.
Very good advice. Thank you, man. And I love this other tip we're going to share with you guys. This is another one that I really didn't know until Ben and I, like I said a second ago, started preparing some just additional content for both my clients as well as Ben's, talking about, again, this credit utilization score, which is something that is really, really important to understand. And more specifically, keeping that credit utilization score under 30%. So I know you can probably explain this a little bit better than me, Ben. So I'll pass it back over to you to just explain this just kind of on a high level.
Oh, thank you. And if you follow me on YouTube, American Money 101, I started that channel because I want to help Americans be more intentional, more literate with their money. In the banking world, I see folks struggling from the same challenges, the same issues, making the same mistakes. And the reason for that is because a lot of us have not had any type of formal financial literacy education. I know I didn't. And so the point of the YouTube channel is just to provide some education around things exactly like this. So what this is right here, this is referred to as credit utilization. So most people think when it comes to credit cards that they just need to make their payment on time. What they don't realize, though, is that credit cards are classified differently than other accounts. So an auto loan, for example, is an installment loan. On an installment loan, you really only need to make your payment on time. When it comes to revolving accounts, though, what is also graded as much or even more than making the payment on time is how you are managing that credit and what that credit utilization looks like. And so you always want to keep that credit utilization under 30%. It's best if it's kept under 10%. How it works is like this. If you have a credit card and the limit is $10,000, you always want to keep the balance on that card at $3,000 or below. So in that example, if your balance is $3,000 and the limit is $10,000, that means that your credit utilization is 30%. Now, the other thing to consider is it's not just per account. There's the local credit utilization, which is per credit card, but then the credit bureaus also factor in your global credit utilization as well. So all of your accounts combined. And so if you have one credit card and the limit's 10,000 and then the next one is 5,000, maybe you have another one that's 20,000, you want to keep the individual or the local credit utilization under 30%, but then also your combined balance to limit coverage as well. You want to make sure that that's under 30%. Now, that's also one reason why I always request credit increases from my credit card providers, not so I can spend more, not so I can finance more or increase my consumption, but just to make sure that that credit utilization is always under 30%. It's also a reason that I pay off my credit card multiple times within the month, just to make sure that I'm maximizing or allowing my score to, just be as high as possible. Now, a lot of us have some spending problems, because that is what our culture teaches or our society teaches. If that's a challenge for you, don't do that as far as requesting your credit card company to increase the limit. You want to make sure that you're disciplined, that you have a plan, that you have a vision. And then again, just don't ever co-sign. And this is another mistake I see every day I see this. I see someone that has co-signed on an auto loan for someone else. And not only are you now giving this person who wasn't able to qualify on their own, you're giving them access to your credit profile. But from a credit reporting perspective, if that auto loan payment that you co-signed with them on is $700 a month, well, that debt is now showing up in your credit report, and that's going to be factored in your credit profile. Now, there can be, in some cases, some ways around that. If they've been making the payment on time for at least 12 months and there's never been a late payment, in some cases, we can exclude that. But the point is it just makes it another hurdle for you. So these are things that you just want to be aware of, regardless if you end up purchasing something now or in the months to come.
Yeah, definitely. For anybody on tonight that maybe this is a 12 months or maybe longer, goal to buy a home, this kind of stuff that we're talking about right now is what's important to implement today. So when that time comes, you're in the right position, the best position possible to get the most favorable terms and to succeed. So that was the first of the 5, the C. Now we're going to talk about L, which is out looking for homes, finding the perfect home. And this is something I'm really passionate about, something that I kind of pride myself on being an expert with, especially with out-of-state relocation type clients. So one of the things that I'd love to do with any client, but especially maybe a first-time homeowner or somebody that is out of state, is just talking with them about what are their priorities. And the way I like to talk about this is, what are your must-haves, what are your nice-to-haves, and any just deal breakers. So you want to consider location, the home type. By home type, I mean, is it a single-family home? Is it a townhome? Or maybe is it a ranch style? Or is it a bi-level? There's different types of homes. And also features. What's most important to you? What's really good too is just to come out here. If you already are in Denver, we can go out, look at homes. Or if you're from out of state, find a good weekend where you can come out and we can get our boots on the ground and just really go out and look at homes. And by being in these different various homes and styles of homes, that'll really help you understand what you like, what you don't like, and sharing those preferences with me really helps us dial this in. As far as the must-haves, nice-to-haves, deal breakers, I'll just share a little bit more on that really quick. So a must-have would be, as an example, you have a family with 2 kids, you need to have a minimum of 3 bedrooms, one for yourself, maybe your partner, and then also 2 bedrooms, 1 for each of your kiddos. That would be a must-have. Or maybe it's a specific school district that you are currently in with your kids. You want to make sure they can stick around and stay with all their friends in that school district. So the new home that you're looking for, making sure it's in a certain school district. A nice-to-have, the good example I love to share with people on this one is garages. So if you're from out of state and maybe you're not familiar with the 4 seasons that we have in Colorado and all the fun hobbies and just activities and sports that you're going to start to get to enjoy, and over time have more and more of these that you start to do, all that stuff that these toys, all these hobbies and sports and things that you're going to start doing, all of that ends up, having a lot of stuff that goes along with it, skis, bikes, camping equipment, a kayak, we can go on and on, but all that stuff ends up needing to go somewhere. And oftentimes it goes in your garage. So if you have a 2-car garage and you start getting all this stuff, all of a sudden you can only fit 1 car in your garage and you got to park the other one on the street. So, maybe you're only thinking you need a 1-car garage. Well, maybe it's a nice to have that second garage space just to keep some of that stuff. So it's not a deal breaker, but it's a nice to have. So just thinking through some of that stuff. And I think the more that you can kind of share with, whether it be myself or any realtor that you're working with, the more you can share this kind of stuff, your priorities with them, that's really going to help them or help me really start to deliver really accurate, the best possible homes to consider. And then the other part of this that I'd like to share before moving on is another really good exercise, which is there's basically 3 things that most people, just have to think through when it comes to buying a house: the price, the location, and the condition of the home. Another word for condition could be like the age of the home, or just, there's other things though, other than age. It could be, a brand new construction home where you don't have to do anything. You buy the home, you move in and it's just perfect. or maybe you prefer a home that has some kind of character to it, maybe a early 1900s bungalow type house. So anyways, price, location, and condition. Unless you're a billionaire, which I'm guessing none of us are on tonight, price is probably important to you. So with all three of these, usually you can have two out of the three. You can have all three, but usually two that are going to be the most important. And then you might have to sacrifice a little bit on the third one. So let's just use an example here. Let's just say that if you guys are familiar with Denver, there's an area called Sloan Lake, which I used to live in. And it's an awesome, very popular part of Denver. It's actually extremely popular. Over the last 10, 15 years, it's really become one of the hot spots of Denver. It's just west of downtown Denver. And in that area, let's just say you have a price point of $700,000 and you want to be in Sloan Lake. So that's the price and that's the location. In a place like Sloan Lake, $700,000, believe it or not, it's not going to get you super far. So the condition might have to be sacrificed a bit. That brand new home that you really want, well, $700,000 in Sloan Lake, it might have a home there that fits those two characteristics, but it might be a bit older. It might require a little bit of TLC after you purchase it. You know, might need a little bit of sweat equity just to kind of fix a few things yourself, just to save money and to get it up to the standards that you are wanting in a home. So that would be an example where the condition is the one that's going to need to be sacrificed a bit. Or let's just say that you really don't want to do anything with your hands. Maybe you're not super handy with, home improvement projects. So condition is very important to you. You want to have a brand new home, and the price is also really important. You have that same, let's just say $500,000 budget. Well, if we know that price and condition are those two most important factors, then the location might need to be a little bit of a sacrifice. Instead of Sloan Lake, you might, and if you want a new construction home, brand new home, you might need to look into some other areas around Denver, maybe Aurora or maybe Lakewood. So there's just, some strategy behind just on the front end before you even maybe go out and look at a home, just thinking through some of this stuff and sharing it with the realtor when that time comes to start actively pursuing a home and going out and touring homes. Just really quick too, a little plug on my website. If you guys go to adamsillsdenver.com, I've got this really great interactive map you can kind of see here on the screen. It's got like over 20 of the neighborhoods all around Denver. So if you aren't that familiar yet with some of the little suburbs and areas around Denver that are also great and awesome for consideration, definitely check that out. You'll get a little bit better feel for the entire Denver metro area. I also have a YouTube channel. If you guys aren't familiar yet, Living in Denver on YouTube. And on there, I also have some links for different other resources that I'll share with you guys later on tonight, but also you can access all of it there. All right, Ben, before we move on to probably my favorite part of this entire masterclass is the step 3, crafting winning offers. Is there anything you want to maybe add before I kind of dive into this one for a few minutes?
Yes, this is my favorite as well. And the reason this step 3, crafting a winning offer, is so important is because so many buyers, agents have these preconceived notions as far as what a winning offer looks like. There's so many of us that just assume the seller is looking for this or for that. And a lot of times we're wrong. And so I'm so excited to hear you talk about how to successfully craft a winning offer.
Yeah, for sure. So for anybody that's, maybe this is a first time for you buying a home, as far as the offer process is concerned, there's basically 3 things that can happen when you submit an offer. And this is pretty basic, but just to kind of run through this quickly. First one is that you're just going to submit an offer to the seller and they're going to accept it as written. It's pretty uncommon, but that's basically, saying that the seller agrees with everything that you've put together in the offer, the price, the terms, the conditions, maybe the dates and deadlines of when you want to close, all that good stuff. That's kind of, pretty uncommon, but does happen. The second one is what we hopefully are never going to have happen, especially if we're crafting this winning offer, is the seller is just going to straight up decline the offer. Maybe the price point is too low in the offer. Maybe it has other aspects of the offer that the seller just doesn't want to even entertain. So instead of what we call a counter offer, which is this third example, sometimes the seller will just say, we're just going to decline it. And maybe the price is significantly off of what the listing price is on the home, and they just don't even want to go through the hassle of entertaining the buyer anymore and, hopefully having a counter. So the most common one of these 3 is number 3, which is the counter offer. And that leads me into just some examples of how you can craft a winning offer. And the biggest thing, which, believe it or not, is very rare these days with other real estate agents. I don't want to throw shade at all realtors out there, but it just blows me away when I'm a selling agent, when I'm selling a home, how rare it is for other realtors to do this exercise with me, which is just reaching out, picking up the phone, and calling the other party. So when I'm representing a buyer, one of the first things I always do is pick up the phone and I call the listing agent, and I just have an open, friendly, honest conversation with them and just try and get a little bit of information out of them about what is the seller's motivation. And as Ben said a few minutes ago, it's not always price. Oftentimes it is, but it could also be some kind of negative things that happen in our lives. It could be a divorce. It could maybe be a job that somebody lost and now they need to maybe move to a different state, or maybe it's a death in the family. Maybe it's, I could go on and on. There's lots of other reasons other than price for why somebody might be selling the house. The reason that's so important is because with that information, that's really going to help us craft an offer that not only is a win for us, but also is really a win for the other side of the transaction. And that's when you have an offer and hopefully get under contract. You have a contract that's going to make it all the way to the finish line. Recently I saw a stat that about a third of right now contracts, once you go under contract, almost a third were actually falling out of contract due to, various reasons. But if you have some of this structure put in place from the get-go, you're much more likely to make it to the closing table and not have any issues arise throughout that process. So just having that understanding of why the seller is selling, and with that info, you can structure the deal maybe a little bit different. So a couple quick examples of this. Let's say that you're putting an offer on a home and the current sellers are a family. Maybe they have a son or a daughter that's just finishing high school, and I had this actually happen earlier this summer. That's why I'm using it as an example.
Okay.
This family that I was helping purchase a home, this seller, had a son, I think it was a son, that was just graduating high school, and they really did not want to, sell the home and have to leave before their son was able to finish out the semester, have some graduation parties, stuff like that. So we knew this because I had reached out and found out this info from talking to the selling agent. So we put in our offer a little bit of a later closing date. And we also included what is in this on the right here, where it says, understand the seller's motivation. Right below there, it says creative strategies like a PCOA, which is a post-closing occupancy agreement. So what we did, we wrote an offer that included a PCOA, a post-closing occupancy agreement, where the closing date was, I think, maybe like June 1st. But then we were actually allowing the family to stay in the home for an additional 30 days until July 1st. When something like that happens, basically after the closing, now you become the owner of the house and basically like a landlord. You can do it for up to 60 days. That's the maximum amount of time. But by doing something like this, not only are you giving the seller, the existing seller, the flexibility, the ability to stay in their home a bit longer, this actually is also becoming even more important for a lot of people today, because what this does, it allows them now to sell the house, get the proceeds from selling their home, and then now they can put an offer out on their next home and have a much more clean offer to submit on their next home that they're trying to purchase. If they don't have that, then what happens a lot of times, if they don't have the cash available, they have to write what's called a conditional offer, meaning that, it might be a great offer, but it's conditional on them selling their house first. And anytime I'm representing a seller, if we get an offer that's conditional, we'll entertain it, but that's a pretty big, hurdle to jump over, because, maybe it's not even under contract yet. Maybe they just listed their house. So there's just a lot of unknowns, and maybe it's not worth, relying on that and expecting it to happen soon to allow you then to sell your house. So a long-winded way of just saying that there's lots of these different strategies to make sure that it's not just a win for you, the buyer, but if you can get it to being also a win for the seller, then that's when we truly have this winning offer, and we're more likely to get it accepted, and we're more likely to get it all the way through to the closing.
Anything, and I just wanted to comment on that really quick, Adam, if I can jump in for a moment. I have made the observation over the years that a lot of buyers have the mindset when they're going through the negotiation process and writing offers that there's a winner and a loser. So someone has to win the offer and someone has to lose the offer. And it's not really the correct thought or approach. And so even me as the lender, I will a lot of times call the listing agent and I will ask, what is important to your seller? Are they looking to close on a certain day? Are they looking for a certain amount of earnest money? Do they have any contingencies that are important to them? Appraisal contingency, home inspection contingency. I'm going to get as much information as I can from the listing agent, the seller, so we can include those things that are important to the seller. But at the same time, though, I'm also realizing that this is the strongest buyer's market that we've had in 15 years. And so I'm having those conversations with my buyer's agent. How long has this property been on the market? Oh, it's been on the market for a month. Okay, great. Well, what's important to me if I'm buying? Well, I'm looking for, I want to get a seller credit to get all my closing costs paid for. I want to buy down the interest rate. And then I want to look at, taking a little bit of money off the sales price. So when I submit what I want in the offer, I'm also being considerate of what the seller is looking for as well. And that is how we're going to submit the offer. So it can be a win-win for both sides. It doesn't mean that it's going to get the contract's going to get accepted right from that first offer, but it's a great way to get the conversation started and get that negotiation started.
Yep. Very well said. So that takes us to the fourth one, which is inspection and appraisal. And I'd love to share a couple things on this one. I won't take up too much time on this point, but since there are a few different people on tonight from out of state, I wanted to kind of address two things. So during the inspections can vary a bit from state to state, but there's a couple things out here in Colorado that are really important to add on to the inspection. So you have an inspector that comes out and usually will, do a very thorough analysis of the entire home. They'll look at all the mechanical systems, the roof, the windows, really everything from top to bottom. But in Colorado, we have a couple things that are also very, very important. Number one, we have what's called radon. And radon is this odorless gas that can oftentimes get trapped underneath the home if you have like a crawl space or any sort of trapped area where it's below the subfloor, below the lowest point of your house. In this area, since it's a trapped area where there's no way for the air to escape, oftentimes that can have a high level of radon. And radon can be dangerous if it's at very high levels. So this is an additional inspection that I always recommend having done if the home already doesn't have a radon mitigation system. So what happens is basically the inspector has a separate a different company that comes out and they install just this little radon test. It needs to be kind of in the lowest point of the house for 48 hours, untouched. And afterwards, they come back, they pick it up, and then they get the levels and they share it with the inspector and the buyers. And this is just one of these things where it's so important because many, many times this has come up at a high level, and then we're able to use that as a negotiation tool to basically get a little bit of a credit at closing to help pay for this radon mitigation system. And it's not crazy expensive. It's usually about $1,500 to install it. But when you're going through this inspection phase as a buyer, sometimes a seller will be very stubborn and just won't agree to any sort of concession or any sort of agreement to pay for anything that's identified during the inspection. But if it's health or safety related, which radon definitely falls under, 9 times out of 10, the seller will budge and hopefully help cover all, if not the majority of that cost. So it's only about $75 to $100 for this radon test, but it's one very easy way to get a little bit of money back if the radon levels do come out a little bit high, and just peace of mind to know that you're moving into a home that's not going to have any issues. So that's the first one. The other big one is what's known as a sewer scope. And a sewer scope is another third party that comes out and they basically run a camera with this snake. It's basically this long wire that has a camera at the end. And the reason this one is so important is because in Colorado, we have a lot of trees out here, obviously, and a lot of trees that have a mind of their own where these roots will kind of go wherever. And if you're looking at a home that might be a bit older, this sewer line pipe that goes from the house out to usually the center or the middle of whatever street your home is on and connect at that point to the main line. Oftentimes, the home is built, installing the sewer line, everything's fine. 20, 30, 40 years later, these trees that were a 5-foot tall tree now are a 40-foot tall tree. And these roots have also expanded. And these older homes actually had clay pipes, which can over time deteriorate. And This is another one that is very low cost. It's about $100 to $150 for the inspection. But I had a recent deal about two and a half years ago where the sewer line identified a couple issues. One was what's known as a belly, which is basically this low point in the pipe where standing water starts to build up. If that gets really bad, that can start to back up and eventually become an issue inside your home. But also because of this root system that existed in this house, it was in Ken Carroll, which is kind of on the far western side of Denver, up into the foothills. It had actually been so deteriorated that it ended up almost costing the deal, because the cost to replace the sewer line was being quoted at over $20,000. So just imagine, the normal inspection goes great. You move into your home, and then a month later, your toilet starts backing up, and you call somebody to come out, and oh, geez, your sewer line's completely busted, and it's going to be $25,000. I can't think of a much worse news to get from somebody than that. So
how terrible is that?
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
Just these little inexpensive add-ons to the inspection that in the big scheme of things are, medial. Don't even worry about that minimal cost compared to the massive reward you're going to get by avoiding some of this if it does come up. So that's really important. Ben,
I was going to jump in really quick. I actually had this happen about 2 weeks ago on a deal that just closed. The buyer got this home inspection done. They got the sewer scope, and they found that the sewer line was partially collapsed already. The property hadn't started backing up yet, and they ended up requesting a new sewer line, and the seller honored that and did it. And this is a $15,000 to $20,000 expense. And so, yes, there is going to be some costs with the inspection and some of these other add-ons, the radon test and the sewer scope. But remember, you're protecting your investment. And then if there are issues, these are opportunities and negotiating chips that you can use as the buyer to go back and request from the seller.
Mm-hmm. And why don't you also just talk a little bit about appraisal, since you're very, I think just being a lender, you're dealing with that probably as much, if not more, than I do as a realtor.
Yeah, that's another great point. During the inspection process, a lot of times that's when the lender will order the appraisal. Now, the lender is ordering the appraisal for them, but it's going to benefit you as the buyer, because it's going to be an independent third-party professional who's going to go out, review the sales contract, look at the most recent comparables within a 1 mile radius over the past 6 months, and they're going to give an independent valuation based off of the overall market. And so the reason that the lender requests that is because they want to make sure that the collateral, which is what the loan is going to be secured to, is worth what the buyer and seller have agreed to pay for. So they want to make sure that there's sufficient collateral, sufficient equity in the property. But by the lender ordering that, it's also protecting the buyer, because in the state of Colorado, if the appraisal comes in less than what the sales price is, the buyer then in the Colorado state contract has the option to cancel the contract and back out, or go back and renegotiate with the seller. And so that's also a really, really important consideration for the buyer. Now, in some cases, if you're very well qualified, you're putting 20% down, you're doing a conventional loan, your lender may get an appraisal waiver where there's enough data on file where Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac may not require a formal appraisal. So there are cases of that too. But if you're putting less than 20% down, if you're looking at an FHA loan, if you're a veteran looking at a VA loan, at that point, an appraisal is going to be required.
And oftentimes, especially about 4 years ago, when it was so crazy here in Denver, where every home would hit the market, and within 48 hours they'd have multiple offers and all that kind of stuff. What was happening then is really just to compete and be able to get your offer accepted, buyers were having to craft offers that in some cases took out some of these conditions. So, again, like in 2019, 2020, a lot of the offers in that time frame, people were actually waiving the appraisals, and you can only do that typically if it's a cash offer. But that, as a seller, when you see that, that's just one less opportunity for the buyer to back out. So it gives a little bit more confidence to the seller that this is going to get it all the way to the closing table. So there are times, especially with cash offers, where the appraisal can be waived. You can also waive the inspection, but of these two, if it's a cash offer, I still recommend always having the inspection included in the offer. the waiving the appraisal. If it's a, a good price point, we're confident on that part. That's usually one that's not a big deal to waive, but the inspection part, just kind of hitting this home, very, very important to always keep that. And then one last thing before we move on this one, because this is another question I get a lot, is any of you guys out there that are really interested in new builds, new construction homes, where you're literally going to be the first person ever to live in the home? Oftentimes these buyers, they say, well, why do I need to get an inspection? It's a brand new home. Well, I've had just as many issues arise from new construction as I have from resale homes. And you'd be surprised, a lot of construction crews, they might, have accidentally thrown tools and different, not tools, but like nails and construction, Tyvek paper, all these different things that have maybe ended up in that sewer line, or maybe there's just some kind of shoddy work that has been done. I always recommend having that inspection done, even on new construction homes. And an inspection right now, I'm typically seeing them cost about $400, maybe $450. So it is a significant cost, but well worth it in my opinion. But after hearing
I'll take it even a step further, Adam. If you're considering new construction, you want to absolutely make sure that you have a real estate agent representing you. I think a lot of people go into new construction and there's a very friendly salesperson that has a big smile and is welcoming you in, but you have to remember the salesperson works for the builder. And so with new construction, the builder controls every piece of the transaction. A lot of times builders even have their own in-house lenders that are part of the corporate structure of the builder. And so if something does come up, whether it's on the lending side or the inspection side, you want to make sure that you have someone who is really representing and advocating for you and is not afraid to have those tough conversations. Why didn't this get done? The plan from the plans and specs, this was not done correctly. We have this issue with the inspection. Someone who is going to be willing to have those tough conversations, and it's not going to cost you anymore to have someone representing you if you are looking at new construction.
Yeah, we haven't really put that anywhere in the presentation, and maybe that's something that we should do for next month. But just so anybody out here tonight that's listening to us, not every time, but I've never had this come up where it wasn't the case, where when you hire somebody like myself, a realtor, to help represent you as a buyer, the buyer very, very, very rarely pays the commission of the buyer agent. So if I was, for example, helping you guys buy a home, you're not paying me anything. The seller is usually paying the buyer's commission. And it's really important to understand that for both resale, so older homes, but also for these new construction homes. And in the new construction example that Ben's saying, if you don't have an agent representing you, they're not going to lower the price, that amount of what the commission would be for like a buyer's agent like myself. They're not even going to bring that up to you. There's no extra leverage you have by not having representation with an agent. So it's just super important to understand that part. And always, feel free to reach out and ask more questions on that if you guys have them. But it's just, good to know that as a buyer, you're not going to be typically paying any commission. On the flip side, whenever it comes time to sell your home, at that point, usually you're going to be paying the commission for both the buyer and the seller. And whenever I'm representing sellers, I've got some strategies behind how to kind of minimize that and be really, intentional about getting the most that you're going to keep in your pocket at the end of the day. So just keep that in mind. Okay, and then let's just run through this final one, closing and final walkthrough. Ben, I'll let you talk about the closing, but before we do that, I'll talk about the final walkthrough. So the final walkthrough is usually the day of. That's ideal, but at worst case scenario, maybe the night before the closing. So let's just say you're buying a home this week and your closing is on Friday. On Thursday afternoon or evening, or ideally Friday morning, you want to make sure you do what's called a final walkthrough, which is where you meet with your real estate agent and you just go out and you physically walk the home one last time and see it right before the closing happens. If you have any, concerns at that point that aren't warranted, meaning if you just have cold feet, you're still going to be obligated, you're going to be tied to the home and you're going to lose your earnest money if you just back out at that point, unless you have reasoning behind it. So there's been a lot of cases, though, where during this final walkthrough, something gets discovered. I had an example last year where, and right around Easter, so in the late spring, typically when Coloradans turn on their irrigation system for the summer, I had a friend, it wasn't a client, it was actually a friend of mine that, turned on his sprinklers and thought everything was good and didn't realize there's this tiny little nut that he has to kind of tighten up in order to avoid that water basically, coming into the house. He forgot to tighten this one little nut, left, went to Easter service, spent the day with his family. They came back home and they had about, 2 feet of standing water in their basement. And this has actually happened a lot of times with the closings of homes, sales of homes where it's a vacant home. So maybe the seller's already moved on and they're maybe even out of state at this point. They're moving into their new home. They're not maybe keeping that close of an eye on certain things. There's a lot going on, obviously, with, moving and buying a new home or selling a home, and things can get overlooked. So if you don't do a final walkthrough, you might, go to the closing, be super excited to go to the home right afterwards, and you have some major issue like that. So it takes, 20 minutes. It's nothing major. You just go to the home, do a quick walkthrough, and just ensure that everything is as expected. Another common one is, you might have what we call fixtures. So anything that the seller has agreed to keep in the home, meaning that you're getting anything in the home with it as part of the purchase of the home. A fixture would be things like lighting fixtures, appliances. Maybe you have a washer and dryer that's in the home. And when you place the offer on the home, you write in the offer that the washer and dryer are going to stay in the home. You're basically including it in the sale of the home. Maybe you do this final walkthrough and you see that the washer and dryer all of a sudden are missing. Maybe they took it with them and they thought they were going to pull a fast one on you. Well, that gives you the ability to, before closing, negotiate. Hey, you guys took out this. The value of those is $2,000. So we're going to have $2,000 of concessions at closing now because you acted against what was in the contract. So just little things like this can be avoided by doing that final walkthrough. And for the out-of-staters on tonight, if you guys aren't able to be in town for the closing, you can always do this remotely through a Zoom. They'll have a third person actually join the Zoom at closing, which is a notary to verify that you are who you say you are for the closing. But if ever something like that comes up, I'm always, or whoever you're working with, they should be able to do this final walkthrough for you, maybe FaceTime you or take a couple videos just to make sure you have the expectation of what you're getting before, signing on the dotted line.
Yeah, and then on closing day, as Adam mentioned, you're going to be signing all of the paperwork. Some of the paperwork is going to be between you and the buyer or the borrower and your lender. Things like the loan application, the final closing disclosure, the promissory note, the deed of trust. There's going to be documents for you to sign between you and the title company. An example of that would be the settlement statement, which is going to be prepared by the title company. And then there's also going to be documents that are going to be signed between you and the seller. So the vesting deed, typically known as a warranty deed or a quitclaim deed, that is where the seller is actually transferring ownership to you as the buyer. There can be some other documents that you'll sign, getting the utilities transferred, etc. You'll also bring your closing funds in that day. It does need to be in the form of a certified funds cashier's check or a wire. And once everything has been signed and the lender's money is there and your money or your down payment and your cash to close has arrived, then at that point, that is when the home is officially yours and you get the keys.
Thanks, Ben. So really quick, guys, I'm going to kind of wrap this up. 3 big mistakes that home buyers make. And these are just coming from both Ben and my personal experience with working with, lots of buyers out there. Really, really big ones. We've talked a little bit about all 3 of these, but just to kind of hit home here. The first one is overlooking hidden costs. So just remember that owning a home, it's not just about the mortgage. There's other expenses that you have to definitely be prepared for going into this, big purchase that you're making. Things like property taxes, insurance, maintenance, potential HOA or homeowner association fees. I'll just touch on property taxes because I actually see, I think Nick just left a message about this one in the chat. So property taxes vary state to state. If you're in Colorado, every 2 years, the county assessor basically values the home, does an assessment on the home. And unfortunately, most times they have an increase in the assessment, which will mean that your property taxes go up. But the way it works here in Denver is the property taxes can vary from location to location, but on average, it's at about 0.6, so a little bit over 0.5% of the home's value is what you're going to be paying in an annual property tax. So let's just say, for example, you buy a $500,000 home. I would expect to pay somewhere between $2,500 and maybe $3,000 a year as your property tax bill. But there is a significant difference if you're looking at specific areas, like maybe a new construction community or even a complete area that's just being developed from the ground up. And I always use an example that's close to where I live now. I live in Littleton, which is kind of southwestern Denver. In an area even further southwest from me is a really beautiful, newer, developed area called Sterling Ranch. And in Sterling Ranch, the property taxes down there are almost at 1.5% right now. So using that, $500,000 home as an example, instead of maybe $2,500 a year, you're looking at maybe $7,500 a year. So that's just an example of how pretty significant of a difference you can find from one area to the next. So anytime you're working with a realtor, whenever we go look at homes, I always do these printouts of every home that we look at. And in that, part of the information that we include is just what the annual property tax amount is, just so we can see that up front and not be surprised, and make sure that that's acceptable for, what you're budgeting as the home, at these additional expenses you're going to have with the home. And Ben, I know you've got a few other maybe points just to share really quickly on this one.
Yeah, I was going to say, from the lending side, one thing that I do as a courtesy to all of the customers that I work with, and to your point, I don't want them to make the mistake of avoiding or overlooking hidden costs. So what they'll do is I'll ask them to send me property addresses that they're interested in. And what I will do based off of their goals for the loan, as far as down payment, I will look up the property taxes. I'll get an insurance quote. I'll verify if there are any applicable HOA dues or not. And I will give them a very accurate breakdown of what their monthly payment's going to be before they write an offer. I'll verify what the financing terms are, the interest rate. So I'll give them an idea of what their payment is going to be based off of the market for that day before they write the offer. So they know going in, before they actually write the offer, if this is in line with the goals that they would have set earlier in the transaction. So at that point, there are no surprises. So me as the lender, I want all of my customers and the families that I'm working with to be able to make informed financial decisions based off of their goals, based off of their boundaries, and based off of their vision. And I found that if we can really narrow down what that payment is going to look like, that cash to close number, and give them that information before they write the offer, it gives them so much more confidence and so much less stress.
It can be significant. Let's just say you're looking at a condo and it's $400,000. Let's say you're looking at two condos, both at $400,000. One that has a very minimal, maybe a $50 a month HOA fee. And the other one, it has a lot more amenities. It's got a brand new clubhouse, a bunch of other stuff, and it's $400 a month in HOA fees. I mean, that could be the difference of, instead of being able to qualify and afford and get approved for a $400,000 condo, you might only be able to be approved for a $350,000 condo in that specific homeowner community. So it could be significant.
Yeah.
These little extra costs can put somebody out of qualifying for purchasing that home. So number two, I already hit this one really hard, so I'm not going to share too much other advice or my opinion on this one, other than one last thing about the new construction. So new construction homes, let's just say that despite what I've been talking, you still are just saying, you know what? No, I don't want to pay that $450 for a home inspection. I'll push back and say, okay, if you don't want to pay for it now, an alternative that I think is also a good strategy is, when you buy a new construction home, typically the builder will give you a 1-year warranty on the home. And that'll include, fixing pretty much anything in the home that was, within reason. If you paint the wall or you damage a wall, they're not going to repair that just because it was your fault, your negligence. But what you can do is, since it's usually a 1-year warranty, schedule this home inspection at about month 10, maybe month 11, but I recommend about month 10. And you might identify a few things then, and then you can have, the home inspector identify those, and you can push back on the builder to have all of that stuff fixed before that 1-year warranty ends. So if you're not willing to pay for it up front, which I still think is a much better, smarter move, maybe an alternative is still doing it, but maybe right before that 1-year warranty ends.
Got to protect that investment. That's always my advice. Yep. You want to know what you're buying.
Mm-hmm. And then third, Ben, you are very passionate about this one. I'll let you take this final third point.
Oh, yeah. I love this one, emotional decision making. And I have worked and had people call me who didn't have any intent on buying a home. It wasn't even a thought of theirs or their families. And all of a sudden they walk into an open house on a Sunday afternoon and they have to have it. And all of a sudden they're in this emotional scramble to get pre-approved. You do not want that to be you. You don't want that to be you. And the reason for that is when you get emotional in the home buying process, that is when you make poor decisions. And it happens a lot. And I understand, I get it, because the home buying process, there is a side to it that is very emotional, but you want to make sure that you're grounded. And when you hear me talk about, if you follow me on YouTube, I talk about financial vision. I talk about having a vision in a lot of different areas of your life, but a lot of us have not been taught to have a vision for our real estate, for our home, for our finances. And so you want to have a plan, because when you have that plan, it gives your daily actions, behaviors, and things that you're working on more purpose, and it gives you boundaries. And so you're less likely to make a poor financial decision, because once you close on that loan and you buy that home, then you're locked into that payment. I was working with an individual. I actually chatted with them earlier this afternoon, and she had bought a property that was kind of emotional with her family, and out in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, because she was looking to do an Airbnb, and the mortgage payment was $7,000 a month. And the market has shifted in that market, and it hasn't performed as well as they thought. And she's still making this $7,000 mortgage payment, and it is just taking its toll every single month. And so that was kind of the conversation that we had today, where she wishes that she was not as emotional about that decision when she was going through the process. And that's what my message to all buyers is, that you are in control. This is your decision. Your real estate professional and your lending professional, we are guides. We're here to support you. We're here to facilitate you with the transaction. But again, we want you to make an informed financial decision on the purchase, on the financing. We want to know what your goals and your boundaries are. And once we know that, we are here to support you. And even if someone doesn't work with me as a lender, I mean, I just want to be able to help people with their money, with their finances, with their mortgage goals, because there's just not a lot of resources and a lot of education out there. I know that me personally, I did not have any type of a mentor or any education regarding money, mortgages, etc. I had to make a lot of mistakes on my own, and I did a lot of dumb things. And so I'm just trying to help people avoid that stuff. And not making emotional decisions is one great way to do that.
Yep. And the only thing I'll add to that is, the more educated, the more prepared you can be, the easier it'll be to avoid being emotional. So even if anybody on tonight that maybe you're just toying around with the idea of buying a home, maybe it's not even that serious of a consideration yet. Maybe it's something that you want to do in 2027. Still reach out. We'd love just to still just connect with you guys and just share some tips, some ideas, just help get that ball rolling, just get started on this process of educating yourself more. So when that day does come, you're in that position where you're not making this emotional, drastic, unnatural type decision and potentially getting yourself in over your head. So just make those smart choices. That's a really, really big one that I know Ben and myself too are just really passionate about. So next steps, let's just talk really quickly about how to move forward. If you guys are just, wanting to connect with us a little bit more, start by contacting somebody that is a lender for a pre-approval. Ben's a great option for that, and love the opportunity to connect with you guys. Then after that, work with somebody like myself or anybody out there that's a real estate expert, somebody that just really understands some of these nuances that we've gone over tonight, like that crafting a winning offer, and also just how they can really help you navigate your home search. Like I said a second ago, even if it's not for another a couple years, maybe you just want to maybe go out for an afternoon and just look at a few homes and just kind of start talking about this with somebody like myself. I'm always happy to do that kind of thing with you guys. So just feel free to reach out, utilize some of those educational resources to make sure you're making the proper decision and not being emotional. And I think the biggest word on this entire screen here is this word here, patient, just patience. Yeah. Being informed and being patient Don't rush into any decisions. That is just such an important thing, I think. So,
and I just want to add one thing really briefly there, Adam. If you want to make sure that you are asking the appropriate questions to your lending and your real estate professional as well. You want to make sure that you're working with someone that is literate in the type of loan and financing that you're looking for. So, for example, not all lenders will offer every type of loan. If you're someone that is looking for down payment assistance, you want to make sure that you're working with a lender that is an expert in down payment assistance. Maybe you're a veteran and you want to make sure that you're working with someone that is an expert in VA loans. Perhaps you're an investor. Well, if you're an investor, you want to make sure that you're working with a lender that understands investing. And ask those questions, advocate for yourself, because if you can align yourself with someone that is representing and knows what you're looking for, it's going to create a much better experience. In some cases, there are online lenders that offer all of these different products, but it doesn't mean that they're experts in any of the products. And so that's why Adam and I have just shared some of the resources and the tools and the products that we offer, and that we're experts in, just to help share those with the audience tonight.
Yeah, definitely. So this screen that's on right now, you guys, I'm going to be sending you all an email after we get off the call here in a few minutes. It's got all of this stuff available for free. Just click the link. You can access any of this stuff. Just really helpful for anybody that's out there that's maybe early on in the process. You just want to educate yourself more. So lots of valuable resources for you to take advantage of. And if you want to, also, you can just scan this QR code to get them that way as well. I'll leave it on the screen for a couple more seconds just in case anybody wants that. And last but not least, we both offer these free 30-minute strategy calls. This is a great opportunity to connect maybe a little bit more one-on-one, address any unique situations that you might have. Maybe you have a question or two that you didn't feel comfortable asking tonight. We can do that on a private, just a one-on-one call. So actually, I see Hannah on tonight. We actually had one of these just yesterday. So this is a great opportunity for us to connect and just chat a little bit more. In the email that I'm going to be sharing with you after tonight, I've got Ben's contact info there. So feel free to contact him and set up a strategy call as well with him if you have questions that are more specific to the lending side of things. All right. So with that, let's just open it up to if there's any other questions. I had somebody send me just a private message with a question here. Let me pull that up really quick, Ben. So Tom, I'm planning to leave my job next month and am worried that it will mess up my chances to get pre-approved. Do I have to wait until I have 2 years of work history at my new job, hoping that my next one is going to be similar? He says he's a teacher.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the requirement and the guideline for traditional lending products, FHA, VA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, conventional, is that you have a 2-year employment history. You don't have to have 2 years at that specific job, just a complete 2-year history. Now, having said that, if you're in the process or you're getting ready to leave your job right now, and then you want to get pre-approved, that could create some challenges because your lender is going to determine what you can qualify for based off of your current employment and income. And so my suggestion would be, depending on what your urgency is, either postpone leaving your current job or waiting until you have your new employment secured with your new employer outlining position, pay details, etc.
Cool. That's helpful. And then I just had one other one from Kelly. Do you do any first-time home buyer loans? My cousin said she bought her first home with 0% down. I think she got some kind of grant a few years ago.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's one of the ways that we're combating affordability in this Denver market. I touched on this earlier, but there's 2 different types of affordabilities that buyers are having a challenge with right now. One of those is down payment, and then the other is monthly payment. So 2 different types of affordability issue challenges. But we do offer down payment assistance loans. We are partnered with CHFA, which is the Colorado Housing and Financing Agency. They're the largest non-for-profit lending institution here in the state of Colorado. You can't call CHFA directly and apply with them. You have to work with one of their participating lenders, which we are. They offer seven different products and programs, including grants, and they also have silent second mortgages. each product and program there is going to have different guidelines as far as credit score, income requirements. A couple of them, you have to be a first-time home buyer, but there's also several that you do not. And some of the income limits are very, very high. And I've even had customers who have put 20% down and still either got the grant or taken out down payment assistance on top of that. So even if you have your own down payment, it's something that you could be eligible for if you qualify from a credit and an income perspective. So again, it's just another resource that we offer that may not be appropriate for someone who, you know, does have a down payment if their goals are a little bit different, but it's something that could be an option.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I think that's all the questions that I had in my end. I don't see any other ones in the chat. You guys, if you don't have any other questions, we really just appreciate you guys joining us tonight. I know this was a ton of info, like I said during my intro, just talking about the, you know, information like through a fire. It feels like drinking through a fire hose. So if you have any follow-up questions that you think about after we get off tonight, feel free to shoot us a message, join one of those one-on-one real estate strategy calls with either or both of us. And more than anything else, we just want to be resources for you guys. So please don't be a stranger. Reach out with anything you guys have that we could potentially help you with. We'd really love the opportunity to do so. And Ben, thanks again for joining me. I know you provide a ton of value, not just to me as a friend and as a peer in the industry, but also I know for everybody else that always joins on these monthly masterclasses. So thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity for the last kind of moment here. What would your advice be or final thoughts for someone that is interested in purchasing over the next, 4 months, let's say, kind of as we depart here? What would your message to that person be?
One of the things I would just recommend is it's worth entertaining the idea of whether it be smarter to, buy now, or maybe it's worth waiting until next year. And that's something that there's a lot of, balls in the air. It could have to do with your interest rate. It could have to do with, the type of home that you're looking to purchase. What's going to happen is we didn't really talk too much tonight about our prediction of where interest rates are going to be going in the next 6 to 12 months. But personally, I think we're going to see them, maybe not at the end of this year, but going into next year, see them definitely get below 6 and hopefully down into that 5.5% range. We'll see what happens. But if it gets down anywhere near there, we're going to have a ton of additional buyers re-enter the market. So a healthy market. So the last 3 years have been significantly below this. But prior to that, on average, we were seeing about 5.5 million homes sell a year. The last 3 years have been closer to 4 million per year. So that extra 1 million to 1.5 million of homes that haven't been selling over the last 3 years, that is a ton of pent up buyer demand. And I think what's going to happen is when these interest rates get to a certain point, a lot of those buyers are going to get off the sidelines. They're going to re-enter the market and they're going to try and start buying homes. And that's going to be causing a lot more competition. So it could, in certain cases, be smart to try and beat that rush and potentially buy a home before that happens. Usually what happens is when a rate gets to a certain point, there's 2 or 3 months of kind of a lull before the market responds. So if we see rates maybe get down into that high 5% or maybe even that mid 5% range by next spring, next summer, give it maybe a month or 2, maybe 3, but probably about a month or so after that, that's when we're really going to see all of the buyers react to that and re-enter the market. So you have an ability in some cases to, even if it's a slightly higher interest rate, get a much more favorable terms on the purchase of the home, meaning a better price, maybe more concessions, different things like that with negotiating, as it still is a buyer's market, being able to just lock in that better price of the home. And you can always refinance your loan terms later. So if it's maybe a 6% loan that you end up locking in now, give it a year, and when it gets down to maybe 5.25, talk to somebody like Ben and get it refinanced at that lower rate. There's this dumb kind of quote that a lot of people use a lot, which is, marry the, now I'm messing it up, Ben. Marry the rate. What is it?
Date the rate, marry the home.
Yeah. And this is a good example of that. What's most important is marrying the home, meaning getting a really good price on the home. Most people that, when it comes time to sell the home, whatever profit you make from selling the home, most of that isn't made on the appreciation. Well, depending on how long you hold the home for, the appreciation is a part of it, but what's also a part of this is the price that you pay for the home, how well of a negotiated price point you did on the home when you purchased it. So with that side of it, now is an incredible time because buyers have more leverage and more of an advantage than they've had in 15 plus years. So if you can make the numbers work, and if the time right now makes sense, or maybe in the next 4 to 6 months makes sense for you, it could be, a great opportunity to get that price on the home a bit lower, and then again refinance in a little bit later on, and end up being kind of a win-win and have a really good solid deal with the property.
Yeah, we know there's tremendous opportunity right now, and there's a lot of things to consider with interest rates in the future. Never a guarantee. A lot of geopolitical, economic stuff coming out. Those future Fed cuts that are going to happen are already priced in the market today, and that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand. But that's all that I got. Very thankful to everyone.
Really quick, Ben, I just saw Hannah had a question. How many pre-approvals do you advise if you want to compare rates in terms? A couple, more than that?
Yeah, well, what I would recommend there is, if you are going to shop around, there are different types of banks. And so if you're looking to get the very best, lowest rate possible, a lot of times that's going to be online. Now, the risk to working with someone online is they're not going to be a market expert. They're not going to know exactly what the details of that specific market. They may not have a lot of diverse loan products, but that's where you're usually going to find the lowest rate. Now, North Point, where I'm at, our rates are not the lowest, but we are very competitive. But you get to work with a dedicated real estate and mortgage professional in myself, in that I am there. You're working directly with me, my team. I'm a local market expert. I'm literate on all of these different loan programs that we offer. And one thing that's great about North Point is that we offer so many different loan programs through our expanded portfolio that a lot of other lenders won't even consider. We do non-warrantable condos. We do that all-in-one loan, which is more of a financial tool. We do bank statement loans. We do DSCR loans. So we have such a diverse set of products. But again, you want to outline what your goals are, what your vision is, and then that'll help you with your decision-making process. Thank you, Hannah.
I would maybe add to that too. In certain cases, if somebody is, very kind of like maybe pushing the high end of their budget with their loan, sometimes with, kind of like the budget type lenders out there, sometimes what can happen is, you don't have as much confidence in that loan, where you might be under contract. You might be getting all the way to that very final stage, which we often call the clear to close, which usually happens about 3 days prior to that cleasing date. And there's been a lot of times where with some of these kind of budget type lenders out there, where they say everything's good, and then you get to that clear to close date, and all of a sudden there's some massive issue that could have been avoided but wasn't, and now the whole deal can fall apart. So
that happens all the time, especially with online lenders, and that's one thing that's different about me. I have never sent out a pre-approval and then had to say, oops, you're not qualified, or oops, we made a mistake. And part of the, a big part of the reason for that is because I was a mortgage underwriter for about 10 years. And so I'm literate in going through tax returns, bank statements. I literally underwrite every customer's loan that I work with, just to allow for higher customer service. And then we get everything knocked out of the transaction, all of those big details up front. And then once the customer goes under contract, at that point, it's smooth sailing.
Yeah. So there's options out there. I think the biggest thing, just like a lot of these other points we've made tonight, is just, being prepared, putting that time in up front, just to make sure that you have the education available to make sure that that right decision is being made. So cool, guys. Well, we'll just hang out here for another minute or two in case anybody else has any follow-up questions, but hope you all have a great night and a great rest of your week. And like I said earlier, we do these every month. So if you want to join the next one, you're more than welcome. We'd love to have you back on, but also I share a recording of this afterwards, and I will be sending an email out tomorrow with that link. So in case you want to watch a little bit of this again, certain sections, you're more than welcome to do that as well.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We appreciate you taking time out of your valuable night, spend an hour and a half with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.